We often think of chemistry as a science of chemicals and chemical reactions. While this is true and we do study chemicals and chemical reactions in chemistry, but there is much more to this subject than just chemical reactions. And if we were to define chemistry, it would be like this. Chemistry is a branch of science in which we study the composition, properties, structure, and chemical reactions of matter. Now, as you can tell from this definition, chemistry is about studying these four aspects of matter. And to really grasp the concept of chemistry, it is important to first understand what these four terms mean. First of all, let's understand the concept of composition of matter. And to do this, let's take lemonade as an example. To make a glass of lemonade, you will need three things: water, sugar, and lemon juice. And to make this exact lemonade, you will need 100 grams of water, 20 grams of sugar, and 30 grams of lemon juice. And this combination is called the composition of lemonade. In other words, the composition of any matter includes its components and the amount of those components. Lemonade belongs to a type of matter called mixtures. And in mixtures, a small change in composition doesn't make much of a difference. For example, if you reduce sugar and add a pinch of salt, it will still be a lemonade. Yes, it will be different in taste, but in the end, it is still a lemonade. But in another type of matter called compounds, composition makes a huge difference. For example, we all know that a water molecule contains two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom, and this is the composition of water. Now, for some unknown reasons, if someone tries to create a new kind of water, they won't get their new type of water. If they replace the oxygen atom with sulfur, they'll end up with an extremely toxic and stinky gas, hydrogen sulfide. And if they alter the ratio of hydrogen to oxygen, they won't get the new type of water either. Instead, they'll produce something else called hydrogen peroxide, which works well as a bleach or disinfectant, but definitely not for drinking purposes. And this is why understanding the composition of matter is so important, because it helps us distinguish between different kinds of matter and understand their properties, since many of the properties of matter depend on its composition. And speaking of properties, they are the characteristics of a matter which are observable and measurable. For example, if you have a glass of water, you can observe and measure its various properties. For instance, you can observe that it is colorless, odorless, and tasteless liquid. Then, if you have a balance and a measuring cylinder nearby, you can measure its mass and volume. With the mass and volume, you can also calculate its density. However, these are just a few basic properties. You can observe and measure many other properties such as solubility, flammability, melting and boiling point, and toxicity. Additionally, two different types of matter will never share all the same properties. For example, if we compare water with ethanol, which is an alcohol, they might share some similarities, but most of their properties will be different. And this is why we study all of these properties of matter, to identify or distinguish different types of matter. Furthermore, we can divide all of these properties into two categories: physical properties and chemical properties. Properties that can be observed and studied without a chemical reaction are called physical properties, while those that can only be studied through chemical reactions are called chemical properties. For example, measuring the mass of water doesn't need a chemical reaction. But to study the flammability of ethanol, we must burn it, and burning is a chemical reaction. And this is why mass is a physical property and flammability is a chemical property. Now that we know what are the properties of matter, let's discuss the structure of matter. The structure of a matter refers to the three-dimensional arrangement of all the units that make up that matter. And to give you an idea of its importance, let me show you a pencil and a diamond. Now, someone who doesn't know chemistry might ask, why are we comparing a cheap pencil to an expensive diamond, since they seem to have nothing in common? But that is not the case here. The core of this pencil and this diamond is made up of same units, carbon atoms. The core in this pencil is made up of graphite, which in turn is made up of carbon atoms. And this diamond is also made up of carbon atoms. But if both of them are made of carbon, then why is one so cheap while the other one is extremely expensive? And the answer to this question lies in their structure. Carbon atoms in graphite are arranged differently than they are in diamonds, and this different arrangement of atoms completely changes their properties. Therefore, to better understand a matter, we should also study its structure. The last thing that we study in chemistry is chemical reactions. Chemical reactions are often mistakenly thought to be performed only in laboratories. However, they are extremely common. In fact, there are trillions and trillions of chemical reactions happening all around us. Photosynthesis in plants, boiling an egg, baking a delicious cookie, and washing of dirty clothes. All of these involves chemical reactions. And if we were to define a chemical reaction at a very basic level, then we can say it is simply a conversion of one substance into another, or it can also be a change in the composition or the structure of substance. For example, when we burn methane in the presence of oxygen, it is converted into carbon dioxide and water. Methane and oxygen are different substances, and carbon dioxide and water are different substances. And as you can see, a chemical reaction has changed both their composition and structure. On the other hand, if we melt ice into water, then this conversion can never be called a chemical reaction because ice and water are different states of the same substance, and their composition and structure is also the same. But if we were to convert graphite into diamond, then that would be a chemical reaction because in this process we have changed the structure of graphite, which led to diamond. And this is why we study the chemical reactions in chemistry, to understand the transformations of matter. And that concludes our discussion. By now, we should have a solid understanding of what chemistry is all about. In the next video, we will discuss the classification of matter based on its chemical composition. So I'll catch you in the next video. Until then, peace.